Hi, everyone. My name's Kadi McKean, and I'm the open source community manager here at ReversingLabs. And today we have quite the guest list to join us for our community webinar. So today is all about SBOMs and PURLs. You know, it's our two favorite topics. So we thought, why not bring in the two experts that we know about this? So today with us, I'm really excited to share that we have Steve Springett, chair of CycloneDX, and the other guy on the other side of the house, who is Philippe Ombredanne. And I hope I didn't get your name wrong. I'm sure I did, but I didn't take much French in high school.
Good, good.
But he is the other half of this, where he chairs and contributes to SPDX. So, two SBOM standards, let's bring both of them together and let's talk about PURLs and SBOMs. So before we get into it, I'm going to let you guys get used to their voice. And before you introduce yourself, can you just tell us a little bit about how you got into SBOMs or PURLs and why this topic means a lot to you? So Philippe, why don't you go first? You're the first Brady Bunch tile I have in my window. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Yes, and welcome for having me. So I got into SBOM at the time when they were not called SBOMs. We used to have spreadsheets, and and eventually we called these bombs. And I was building tools to figure out where code comes from, open source tools. The key driver was licensing, and it basically it's how it started. Just correction, I'm not the chair of SPDX. I'm one of the co-founders. I'm chairing PURL.
I will be having that burned into my brain, but thank you for the correction on that. It's good to know.
It's important. I'm also a core
Yeah.
contributor to CycloneDX. And I think having both Steve and I on the same screen is a good thing. We're good buddies. We're working together. And eventually there's been some fragmentation in the community because having so many standards. We're trying to resolve this.
Yeah. That's why I like you guys as a good team. I mean, I saw you guys at FOSDEM together presenting, and I just saw the magic in the room and the people with the questions. You could literally see the hamster on the wheel in people's minds as they were watching both of you together. So I'm very lucky and grateful both of you are here today, and I will remember you're a core contributor and a co-founder. So I will remember this moving forward. And
No, no
Steve,
worries, no worries. I just want to make sure I don't bruise egos otherwise.
yes. Hey, it's open source. We're all transparent here, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So Steve, I know you've done some other things with Reversing Labs. Today's a bit different. We're doing it all from the community angle. So thank you for hopping on today. You want to tell us a little bit about who you are and your relationship to this topic?
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Katie. Thank you, Reversing Labs, for having me back. Yeah, I got into supply chain back in 2008, and it was not software supply chain that I was working with. I was working with pharmaceutical industry at the time, and I learned a ton about what works and what doesn't in a manufacturing type of perspective. Fast forward about 4 years, 2012. And I had a need to track the full stack inventory of these server appliances that we were selling into enterprises. Everything from the hardware to the firmware to the operating system package, application libraries. I mean, the full stack. And the term SBOM didn't exist, nor did the phrasing of why would I limit my bill of material to just software also didn't really make sense to me because, again, I had full stack requirements. So that's kind of where things like dependency track and eventually the CycloneDX object model came from, is really these full stack requirements that I had. And I currently lead the CycloneDX team, and I was the founder and former chair of ECMA TC54, which is standardizing CycloneDX, package URL, and a bunch of other things that we have on our roadmap as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. You're both getting shout outs about FOSDEM I see in the chat. So I'm glad other people were able to see it because it really just it was a light bulb moment for me, and I know many other people in that room. So it was great. And because of it, that's why you guys are here today. I got to watch that and I thought, more people need to see this. So Let's rip into this. I think before we talk about what PURLs are, though, we need to set the stage for those at home. We do talk about SBOMs a lot, but maybe not everybody knows. So, let's just start with the basics here. Is what is an SBOM? Are there different flavors of SBOMs or bombs? To Philippe's original point, we were just calling them bombs for some things. And what is it, and why do we see organizations moving in that direction to have them? Or better yet, are organizations having a hard time putting them in practice, and why? So
Yeah.
I'll let
So
you know.
yeah, I'll take a stab at this one first. In short, a bill of material is just an inventory of things.
Mhm.
An SBOM is, an inventory of the software things. If you look at the NTIA from the U.S. government or the CISA documentation, it really doesn't go too much beyond that. I think it has supplier and dependencies and a bunch of other aspects. Supplier being one of these key attributes, because vulnerability management is really the driving use case for a lot of the SBOM conversations. And when a vulnerability happens, you really need to know who that supplier is so that the organizations can kind of contact the responsible party. So there's, some ancillary fields around the inventory, but both of the SBOM formats, Cyclone, SPDX, doesn't matter. They both can capture a lot of other information outside of just inventory.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there are different flavors, and there's different life cycle phases that a bill of material can kind of go through in the course of its life cycle. Everything from design and procurement bills of materials all the way through operational and destruction bills of materials. Now, we typically think about SBOMs in the course of build SBOMs or operational SBOMs. What is the inventory of things that when we build a piece of software, and then once we build it, it obviously needs to be deployed somewhere. And what is the operational bill of material? What is the effective runtime dependencies in operation at that given time? So that's kind of where we think about it. And yes, I mean, because of the formats, they handle so much other information other than just inventory. There's a lot of other kind of acronyms that kind of have sprung about to pinpoint the very specific types of data that people care about.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting is beyond this topic of which type of SBOMs, I like to take things simple, and there's the software you use in development and the software you actually distribute, ship, or deploy. Right now, we're just at the infancy. It's difficult for many organizations to figure out which software package they use.
Yeah.
I like to think we need to focus first on software that's shipped. Just because we don't know all the software we use in development, and trust me, at any scale, it's difficult. I helped a US company that does open source software, fairly large, 1,000 developers, who were an open source company, fairly large. They thought originally they had 600 packages used in their open source product. But they were not sure. They had difficulties building an SBOM because they had a lot of layered technologies and build systems. Scanning the source code revealed that they were using about 26,000 packages in development.
Wow.
It's like 600 to 26,000. That's a big jump. And you could put your spreadsheet around and your head around 600 rows. You cannot. At 26,000, it starts to be difficult. The real thing is that in production, they're using about 2,600, which is another magnitude smaller than what they use in development. And I think what we need to work together as industry is how we can find this sweet spot, which is not grossly underestimating what's used, not vastly overinflating what we use if we only look at what's used in development and trying to find a sweet spot first of what's used in production and deployment. There are a few caveats though. There are high assurance environments. We're talking about healthcare, military, operational technology, where you may need to also look at the 26,000. But the rest of us may not always need to look at that.
I think that's a good point too, because I knew the number you were going to say was larger, right, than 600, but 26,000 was not in the ballpark
Yes,
of what I was thinking.
that was not in the ballpark of what I was expecting. Actually, it broke our open source tools easily. The first runs were not working at all.
Oh my God, I'm sure. Because it just goes to show you too, like that transitive dependency tree, you know what I mean? That really is that Russian nesting doll that just keeps growing and growing and
Yeah,
growing. So it's crazy to one be able to identify just quite how large that was and what they were using, and that's just in shipping, to your point,
yeah,
which is wild to me.
yes.
So, part of that problem that you're talking about too is that package identification piece, right? So, sometimes what I have noticed in talking with other people is that identification problems is usually the biggest gap they have when it comes to vulnerability matching in remediation. So, what kind of problem are we looking at here, and how do people kind of identify where they are having these mismatches and what can they do about it? Because it's all fine and dandy to have something, but then you might have a mismatch of the packages that are close but not quite. So it's like, how do you identify what you're actually using versus something that might be a mismatch or a lookalike?
Yeah. So maybe I can talk a bit about the genesis of PURL for a sec.
Hmm.
Is we were doing tools to figure out what are the package, what are the license, and collecting information from package manifest. And now users were asking, "Oh, what do you do about security?" And says nothing. And they kept asking, "What do you do about security?" Nothing. And third time's a charm. We said, "Okay, let's do something." And there was the thing called the National Vulnerability Database,
Mm.
and so we were getting information from package manifest, like an npm or a PyPI package, and trying to look up in this National Vulnerability Database was really painful. There was this thing called CPE, and at the time, for instance, zlib, which is a well-known compression library used in zip, gzip on Linux, was called GNU zlib. This is not a GNU project. GNU is something for the Free Software Foundation. It's written by two individuals, but it's not a GNU project. So there was these weird difficulties to map the software you use to how it's identified in a vulnerability database. That's really the key of the problem. And we're not security people originally. On our side, we're coming from software development and software composition analysis. And we found a way to say, well, what can we do to bridge the gap? And that's how PURL came about, knowing that we really wanted to have something that's at the beginning super simple, just bridging the gap between a scan of a code base and a vulnerability database. Maybe Steve, you want to add something there because you were one of the very early adopter of PURL on Cyclone, and just explain your journey.
Yeah. No, that's valuable. The point that Philippe makes cannot be, underscored more. There are so many CPEs that, CPE only has three fields. It's vendor, product, version. And there are so many CPEs out there where all three of the fields in the CPE dictionary actually do not match what the project themselves call it and label it. And a lot of this goes back to CPE. Yes, it is a specification, but it's also a process. It requires manual human intervention to name things. And many times what name results does not match the reality of what the project, the open source project, actually refers to it as. I used to give an example from Red Hat, one of the JBoss projects, where literally all three of the fields were just not accurate. So when you're talking about, trying to, through automation, be able to do lookups for vulnerabilities, good luck, right? That's kind of where the beauty of PURL that I kind of saw back in, I think it was 2017-ish, really early on. I can't remember if it was Jeremy Long or Brian Fox over at Sonotype that kind of introduced me to this new project called OSS Index.
Mhm.
And it was quite literally, I believe, the very first freely available vulnerability database that existed that supported PURLs. And PURL was this unlike CPE, which is centralized naming, centralized authority. The beauty of PURL is that it's decentralized. The projects that create the software, they're the ones who are naming the things and versioning the things. They're the ones essentially responsible for PURL. So just by the fact that they are naming the software, that's basically how you would construct the PURL. So the beauty of PURL is that it really matches more closely reality. Is it perfect? No, but it is thousands% better than what we had with CPE. So my journey really was first discovering OSS Index and really the power that PURL can have for vulnerability management. And then in early 2018, I included support in PURL in version 1.0 of CycloneDX because I knew that this thing was, if you want to go from basic levels of automation to hyper automation at scale, you're going to need something like PURL to get you there. And I kind of saw the writing on the walls, and hats off to Philippe and team for kind of creating it because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's also interesting to have that, foresight too, to see like this is something we're seeing and it's the writings on the wall, to your point of what you said, is this is where the industry's going. So I mean, it's kind of incredible to be able to see that journey, and also because I've seen this in real time, from
Yeah.
having those conversations about OSS Index and watching that get implemented. So,
But
I
there
think,
was no foresight. Sorry to interrupt. There was absolutely no foresight. It just happens that there was a very selfish, small problem to resolve, which resonated with others. But there was no like grand
Take
plan
the
of,
credit, Philippe.
I was gonna say, come on, just go with it, buddy.
yeah,
But yeah, no, I think it's awesome. Like maybe it was selfish in wanting to solve that problem for you, but like now other people have access to it, which is cool because you're seeing more and more free tools pop up daily where they do have access to pearls where it does give you that more precise information. So yeah, that's just, great. So we've talked about what an SBOM is, what problems does the Pearl solve, right? And now I want to kind of talk about putting a Pearl into action, right? We haven't talked about that yet. So we understand what it is now and how it can give you more precise and accurate information. Does it give you everything? No, but it can be more accurate. And I think the example, what did you use at FOSDEM? It was, SBOM is the GPS, whereas the Pearl gives you the exact address. Um,
it's slightly different. Maybe a checksum is like a GPS coordinate. So you have a SHA-256 for, say, an archive, tells you bit for bit what is the code. Uh, in your backyard, you may have an infinite number of GPS coordinates, but you have only a street address. When you invite me to a barbecue to your place, you don't give me the GPS coordinate of the
no.
place where your barbecue sits in the backyard. Just give me the street address. So a Pearl is more like that, street address.
Okay. Street address. Got it. So, I want to understand because we want to make sure people can understand how can they start implementing pearls today? What practical steps can they take to start adding pearls into their SBOM workflows?
So I think the first step is to use tools. There's a bunch of open source tools which are able to handle this pretty nicely. There's large number of these come from the CycloneDX community. We have also open source tools as part of AboutCode. The point is that today, most of the tools you see, be they open source or commercial, do provide this level of support. If they don't, I think you should demand your vendor to actually support that. I like to think that an SBOM without a PURL is not actionable. It's not that good at the brick, but close to. So
why would you?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, why would you say it's not actionable?
Well, it comes back to the topic of CP. If you don't have an identifier that you can use in the next step, so say you've identified package use in a software product, next step would be to figure out, is there known security vulnerabilities? If you need to manually do some research for each of the package in your SBOM, you've lost it. You cannot actually, act on any of these things without manual intervention. And if you have 26,000 of these, good luck with that, right? On one product. So if you expand that to a larger corporations, which may have 10 or hundreds of products, each of them with 10 or hundreds of versions, and you potentially have now a million package problem. You need the identifier that can help you reasonably reliably look up the next step, vulnerability database. Could be enriching information for that package. It's the exact set of license, contributors, whatever other information would be useful to get a better handle on the package and potentially the risk it represents in your software supply chain. Without this identifier, everything breaks loose. I mean, there's no action, no automation possible.
I kind of view it as, I agree, Philippe. I kind of view it as, imagine like you get a box from your favorite online retailer and you don't know what's inside. You maybe have a semi-accurate description. Oh, it's a widget A. That doesn't really tell you a lot, right? But if you had a barcode, you could actually scan it and know exactly what's in the box. And I kind of view PURLs as kind of like that, right? And the ability to scan, know exactly what that thing is, that is, now that you actually have the identity for that thing established, now you can do all kinds of automation. Whereas if you had to guess using a bunch of other data that you may or may not have, you're just creating noise. It's not actionable.
Yeah. The other thing is that there's little friction between PURL detected in your software environment, say scanning a Git checkout, and how a software developer thinks about this package. So, I use an NPM package called Chalk version 4.3. There's no more to it than that in the PURL. Yeah. That's what makes it simple. It's obvious. You don't. We have a spec, but literally you wouldn't need a documentation to understand what it means 99% of the time.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it's definitely created with developer thought in mind, you know what I mean? And especially in that process. So it's not like you have to think of too much more. And it goes right into their workflows, which is great and right in line with that thinking, like you said. What's a common mistake, or edge cases that teams should watch out for when they're generating PURLs?
Well, you're welcome to comment, Steve, also. I think the problem is that we underspecified a bit PURL, which made it really easy to adopt. I'm not a professional spec on standard developer, and we made a lot of small mistakes, which combined together create some growing pains. And so it's something we're trying to address. But for instance, you have sometimes a lot of creativity in some tools, and this creativity can be problematic. They come in two flavors. The first one is inventing your own PURL. It's a problem because it's unlikely the receiving party will know about that. The second problem is mistaken identification. And I like to take this example where last year a large German industrial company asked us, hey, you know, we have bought every single software composition analysis tool that are on the market. Every team went on their own and they bought them all. It's a mess.
Wow.
We'd like to see if you could benchmark that against open source tools to see if we could bring a bit of sanity to the process. And with a lot of hubris, we said, hey, easy. We're just going to pull a CycloneDX SBOM and ask each of the team to produce that on a set of reference container images, Docker images. It's going to be a week of work and we'll be done, you know, compare the SBOM. And it was a total freaking mess. We had SBOMs which were not valid JSON. We asked everybody to produce JSON except for one, which was only XML. But invalid JSON, not schema valid. But the bigger problem was not so much the surface of the syntax of SBOMs, but was the content, which was not faithfully representing what was in these containers. There's one case that I always like to showcase. One of the tool, commercial tool, not yours, and I won't name it, scanning a universal base image from Red Hat, which contains only Red Hat packages, RPMs, found there was a Debian package there. And trust me, I mean, I have a lot of good buddies at Red Hat. Red Hat will not produce an image with Debian package. The same way for Debian, they would not put Red Hat package in a Debian image. I can do it. I can create Frankenstein image like that if I want. The problem is really goes very deep because it looks funny on the surface. But there's two cases. First case, in this case, actually, there was the upstream package was really correct in the sense that this package existed, but was incorrect package type, incorrect versions. And it means also different patch level. Patch level means also different security profile, different vulnerabilities. And first case, the RPM package that was ignored and replaced by supposedly a Debian package, imagine it's vulnerable. So you ask your team, hey, go fix this, replace this RPM. Here we have with something, and people scratch or replace Debian package, sorry. And they say, oh, well, we don't know how to update this Debian package on this RPM image. So you have churn, busy work, wasted time. And we know vulnerability management time is really precious. You don't want to waste that.
Right.
Second case, it's masking a vulnerable RPM. And you say, oh, I'm cool. I have this Debian package there. It's not vulnerable. All is fine. And now you have the false sentiment that you're safe, except that you just missed the stuff. So that's really a big issue right now. There's a couple of ways we're trying to address this. The first way is ensuring that we have libraries, open source libraries, and open source data sets that a software developer can easily check if a PURL is correct and exist. So literally, we've built a bunch of tools we call PURL validators. There's a version in Go, Python, and Rust that anyone can integrate in their own code base, commercial or open source, to check, does this PURL exist? And it's fed with a compressed data set of all the known PURLs of all the common open source ecosystems and updated on a regular basis. The second one is to put out benchmarks saying, hey, you know, when you scan this Universal base image from Red Hat. This is the list of package you should have. This is the Cyclone SBOM. This is the list of PURLs. And if you don't get that right, go back to the drawing board, review your design, update your code until you get. Hopefully, the two combined should help make the ecosystem a bit more healthy there. Because again, the small details that look funny, like this small example of an RPM masked by a false Debian package, can have a lot of impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it also depends on like where in the life cycle things are being built as well. If you're generating an SBOM and thus, PURLs for your inventory at build time, your probability that you're going to have mostly accurate inventory is going to be much greater than, say, if you are extracting firmware from an embedded device and essentially using heuristics to make educated guesses on what the embedded software was. So the life cycle absolutely plays a key role in accuracy. One of the reasons, this is actually one of the reasons why CycloneDX actually includes this evidence capability. So we can say, well, based on this evidence, using these methods and techniques, I believe with this bit of confidence that it is this package, right? It is this piece of software. And you can have conflicting pieces of evidence.
Yeah.
And by doing so, you actually give the consumer a lot more information on what the package could potentially be, which I think is a really interesting use case that unfortunately I don't think a lot of people kind of realize is there, but hopefully tools start to adopt.
Yeah.
I think for me, oh,
go ahead.
I think for me, the first thing I was thinking is like this would really help with triaging. You know what I mean? When you have things coming in where it's like maybe a 0 day or just, triaging your backlog even of like what vulnerabilities might be popping up or things that you just don't want in your risk posture. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't come up to par. So, I feel like that's a strong use case to use this, especially when it comes to triaging different pieces of this.
Yeah, and a lot of this can be automated through AI. In the case of like, Philippe's example with Red Hat and Debian, right? AI, LLMs are really good at pattern matching and identifying anomalies or similar behaviors. So what we want to do in a lot of cases, because I've worked most of my career in product security. And for every security engineer, there's 100+ developers or whatever it is. So we have a problem of scale, and we need to be able to automate just not just for strategic reasons, but we have to automate for survival. And honestly, PURL and getting these things right is one of these low-hanging fruits, right? This is the minimum entry to be able to do all the other things that a security organization needs to do. So the more we can automate, the more we can detect anomalies, I think the better off we'll be.
Yeah, there's an interesting topic, by the way, about another problem with SBOM as more and more folks adopt SBOMs. And some tools have the ability to introspect binaries, for instance. So here's an interesting scenario I've just seen played out recently. A company producing software was contractually mandated by their customers to share an SBOM. So they send an SBOM and the customer also installed the binaries, but they used some tool, whatever it is, to scan the binaries. And then there was this kind of back and forth saying, oh, but your SBOM doesn't match what I see in your product when I scan it with my tool. Which, right or wrong, that's not the point. The point is that when you have these discrepancies and misunderstanding, you have maybe someone from the customer that reach out to the sales, that calls his tech person, says, I have no idea what they're meaning. So let's call legal. And then they go to engineering. And by the time you finish processing this support request, which is uncommon and will become common, you spend an inordinate amount of time and resources, which would have been better spent elsewhere. So how we enable transparencies in the software supply chain exchanges and resolving conflicts, which is one of the objectives, for instance, of the T project
Yep.
on CycloneDX, is going to be really critical because at scale, these few events that we see as you have more and more regulations that mandate these exchanges, at scale, it's going to be a jolly mess.
So I think that's probably a good segue. We've talked a lot about PURL, but T, that was new for me back in February when I heard about it. Um, and I don't think many people do know about it. So if you don't mind, can you give us like the TLDR? What is this T project? And I believe like on a couple of calls I've been on, Steve's been brought in to maybe talk about it. Um, but who knows? Maybe I'm blending things together. Today is a rough day for me,
No.
apparently.
No, T basically started out as an idea, I think almost 5 years ago by one of CycloneDX's very first maintainers, Patrick Dwyer. And it in a sense, it is a way to share supply chain artifacts and intelligence. And I'll just prefix that with autonomously. Autonomously share and consume supply chain artifacts and intelligence. Um, that's the TLDR. What does this mean? It means that if I'm an organization and I have 10,000 vendors that I do business with, I don't have to log into 5 or 10,000 support websites or send 10,000 emails or whatever the case is in order to get SBOMs and CBOMs and everything else that my organization might want. Instead, I can automate the discovery of the things that I want. But better yet, in a future version, probably 1.1, I'll actually be able to ask it questions. Because in a lot of cases, organizations, honestly, there's a lack of willing to share
Yeah.
unnecessarily. And there is a lot of complexity on the consumption side because you get SBOMs, a bunch of lights, because it has a PURL, so a bunch of lights show up that may or may not actually mean anything. So again, without context, it's not really actionable. It's noise.
Yeah.
So on the consumption side, basic questions such as, are there any known vulnerabilities in your product that I have to, have workarounds temporarily while you create a fix? Maybe that's one of the questions, right? So yes, we'll be able to share the supply chain artifacts. Doesn't matter what kind of artifact it is, Cyclone, SPDX, OpenVex, etc. But more importantly, we'll be able to share the intelligence through an API.
It's pretty sweet. Being able
Yeah.
to, I think that sharing that's kind of powerful right there.
Sharing is caring.
It is. It's really funny how like simple life lessons that you're taught when you're little just carry on through life and mean the most. Okay. So, we've talked about a variety of things today when it comes to PURL. We just talked a little about T, how they're kind of all a little bit interconnected. I think the last thing I really want to dig into, and people, if they have, yes, Henry, transparency is caring. Um, and feel free, folks at home, please put your questions in the chat. We'd love to be able to have Philippe and Steve answer them. The question I have though is, what's the correlation between all of this across ecosystems? Is PURL helping or T helping to make, um, that correlation across tools, ecosystems, and even formats between, CycloneDX or SPDX? Are we all starting to move in that direction where we can all kind of see a same or similar answer? Whereas it's not just like, well, my tool says this format says this. And now we're kind of moving in that direction where you might have a different method of getting to that answer, right? But we're still getting to the type of conclusion. Would you say that's correct, or am I off the mark?
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. I mean, that's what we're striving to achieve.
Yeah.
There's a few dark spots for now. For instance, say you're the Linux kernel or CRL or OpenSSL, small software package nobody's using, right? There's no PURL for them, because the whole premise of PURL is to say we have ecosystems like Maven, like NPM, Ruby gems, and they are the authority and the invisible hand that ensures that we have a consistent name that we can resolve to actual downloadable bits of code and archives. There's no such thing for any of these packages. So that's a problem. That's something we're working on, Steve and others in the community. And actually, you were talking about FOSDEM. I sat down with one of the lead maintainers of the Linux kernel, and we hashed out something together. We're working in a community to have a solution for each of these packages that don't live in a structured ecosystem or don't have a package registry. So all the C, C++ world, commercial software, internally managed software, standalone open source projects, all these, and they represent a large portion of the ecosystem, right? It's not like small potatoes. We're trying to find a way which will enable to have PURLs for this. The good thing is, again, talking with folks from the Linux kernel, they were telling me, hey, as soon as I have a solution, I'm going to backfill all the CVEs we've ever released and published. And today, the kernel is the #2 producers of CV in the world, just behind I hope I won't be disparaging them, just behind a CV spammer called WordFence, which, weirdly enough, is the larger producer of CVs, but they're probably making a business out of it. But so the kernel right now says, we want PURL, we want to backfill every CVs we've ever published, and we want to forward feed package URLs as soon as you give us something we can work on. It's going to be huge. Again, there's a large number of CVEs published by the kernel. There's a good reason for that. It's context. As a kernel developer, I don't know how you're going to use my code. So a bug, not all the bugs are security vulnerabilities, but there's many bugs which in a certain usage context can express themselves as an exploitable vulnerability, especially on an OS operating system, right? It's kind of at the bottom of the stack.
Yeah.
The nice thing about PURL is that, unlike CPE, PURL is actually extensible. So while the specification itself is, there's not a lot of issues with that, I think the gaps that Philippe is talking about are really just the PURL types, which is one of the extensible mechanisms. So that's kind of the beauty about PURL, is that if an ecosystem doesn't exist today, that's fine. We can create a new PURL type for it tomorrow. And I know, like, Philippe and I and others are kind of working on PURL types again for the Linux kernel and commercial software and a bunch of other things that are going to be required. But that's the beauty of PURL, is that it is extensible.
Yeah. Which is great, because you never know when a new, hot thing is going to pop up, because I feel like, like Go, it came around 10, 15, whatever years ago, and then it exploded, and so didn't Rust. So you need to be able, you never know what the next thing's going to be and how, easily accessible it is or what you're going to do. So that's great that you'll have that type of support moving forward. Also for, the kernel, I do think that's an interesting one, because like you said, that's a gnarly one to take on, just because of how well it's used, inherent things that go wrong with it. And then also, I don't know what this thought bubble is, but didn't a couple of years ago, like, college students who are working on a PhD, like, intentionally infect part of it too? And I think they got in trouble for it because they were saying it was part of their research.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, which was wild. I was like, why would you do that?
Yeah, well, now you don't need to have students for that. A good AI agentic bot can do the same. There was a bunch of compromise published a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago, uh, which really freaked me out and probably a lot. We have about 150 public GitHub repos. We had to do a detailed review of every one of them and change literally all the credentials and rotate all the API keys we're using for publishing. And we're changing the whole way of publishing. So right now, I think the scary stuff is really Gen AI bots, agentic bots, which can do this kind of attacks very efficiently and at a marginal cost of zero.
Yeah, that's the truth. Free 99. Well, for those of you at home, I know that Philippe's put in some resources in there. Also, Joanna, my colleague, has been putting in some resources. Please feel free to ask your questions. This doesn't have to just be me asking questions and learning about a variety of different things. Um, because this is all open source, I'd love to know for those at home, maybe, how can they get involved in the project like this? These types of things take people, and everybody usually has 9 to 5 jobs. So the more people you can get involved with these projects, the stronger the project becomes, more adoption. How can people get involved in it?
So here's a way to get 96 job on your roster. Steve, please go ahead. Explain a bit how to join and help Cyclone.
Yeah, I put one of the links in the chat. I was about ready to put the other link in there as well. But open source is interesting because a lot of folks think it's only technical contributions that matter, and that couldn't be further from the truth, right? We're always looking for UX people. We're looking for technical writers. We're looking for outreach folks as well. Contributing to the sustainability of open source projects takes a lot of different types of skills, not just people who can write and test code. Yes, we need that as well, but we need a lot of other things. Put some ways to contribute to CycloneDX on the screen, as well as some of the working groups that we currently have ongoing right now. One of our big things, one of our big pushes for this year is CycloneDX 2.0. 2.0 is going to be a monumental step forward. I'm really looking forward to this. It will be JSON only. We'll revisit whether or not we want to do CBOR support or anything else, but it'll be JSON only. It's going to support a whole host of other things that go well beyond bill of materials that the industry has been really asking for. So feel free to join the working groups. And then also let me put in, while you ask Philippe the same question, I'm going to go ahead and put in the link to the Transparency Exchange API, as well as the CycloneDX Slack channel, because that's where all of the activity really happens.
Thank you for spilling the tea, Steve. I had to, I had to. Philippe, what about you? How can people get involved with PURL, maybe SPDX or CycloneDX? I know Steve covered that, but any ways you can get people involved in this or resources you think that would be appropriate? I know you put a few links in the chat.
So I did put a link to the package URL repository. We have a large number of requests, which are, a lot of them are clarification on the spec, but the bulk is new package types. And we have a lot of pull requests, and we need help to triage, review, help usher that to completion. It's a lot of work, and literally last year we received an investment from the German federal government sovereign tech agency of €1 million, actually €500,000, which means $10 million, right?
Yep.
No, but so to help us usher PURL to become an ECMA standard, that was much welcomed. We had about 250 issues and pull requests. We resolved a bazillion of them, and it's a leaky bucket. It's part of the success is that the more we fix, the more come in. So helping review that, you don't need to have technical skills. You need to have a bit of understanding of the space, but a lot can be done with very little input. And it's a lot of work to review all of these. And we want to make sure we're fast and nimble, but at the same time that we have a good community consensus at the same time. So helping there would be awesome. Ensuring your tools have support for PURL, making it know, support all the open source libraries, also they need love, is the right way to go.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And I love that you both referenced too that it's not just developers you're looking for. It's so much more in these projects. Because I know when I first got introduced to open source, I was like, there is nothing I could help you with. And then someone like had to sit me down and be like, there's actually a lot more, Katie, that goes involved into this. So thank you for explaining that.
So now, go ahead. Now, I wanted
Well,
to say something about open source, by the way. There's something
good.
interesting going on, and that's coming from GenAI, where I think really there's an inflection point over the last 6 months about the capabilities of frontier models like Claude Opus 4.6 or GPT 5.3 Codex and now 5.4, where we're reaching a point where reverse engineering software, in particular, projecting a spec that you inferred from an existing open source project in another language becomes almost a free operation. It raises tons of questions about 2 things. First, the future of open source. If you can generate reasonably efficient, enough tested code that does stuff efficiently and cheaply, what does it mean for open source? Eventually, it could collapse. From a security point of view, there's really something weird you could do. Is you could literally reverse engineers or fork each and every single open source package you use in a stack with slight modification and refactoring, which means they're no longer detectable as the original packages. And you could do that in an entirely legal manner. It's going to raise tons of questions, not only about open source, the legality of open source, but what it means to have a software supply chain if you could have every piece of software being custom. Yeah. Like there's no PURL anymore. Here, forget about this. It's literally, you don't use Log4j, but you fork Log4j, you renamed it, you refactored it, you respect everything about the Apache license. You're fine. But it's no longer detectable. But you still have the vulnerability in a way. That's just, my mind is exploding when I think about this and what we can do about it. It's a real problem that is emerging.
Would that be something a binary would help with, though? Because then you'd be looking at the behavior of it?
There are techniques for fingerprinting the abstract syntax tree. So if you can identify the vulnerable function or method and create a fingerprint of that, it doesn't matter what the variables are called or spacing or anything else, right? The fingerprinting techniques take all that into consideration. But there are ways to do it. Most vulnerability databases do not have that level of information. But Philippe's right. I mean, we're getting to that point where some organizations are already actively discussing de-risking themselves from open source projects. Right? This is not theoretical. This will likely happen, not at a massive scale, however, but it will happen gradually over time. And the discoverability aspect is going to be real. And we're going to need additional types of data like fingerprinting of AST, et cetera, to kind of augment things like PURLs so that we can actually discover the more hidden vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Well, now you got my brain going, so I might have to invite you guys back to talk more about this.
No, but to your point, binary analysis capabilities, looking at the behavior, all would be things that could be useful in this new world. I really don't know what shape it's going to take, but we're going to be forced to invent new tools, new ways in this new world where the marginal cost of generating code may become close to zero.
Well, we'll have to save that one for like June or something, so I can have a better comment on it. Who knows? We might have more things that happen between now and then too. But Philippe and Steve, I know we're at time. Thank you so much for stopping by today and letting me ask questions. I just really thought that presentation and some of the other ones I saw you guys give at FOSDEM was really impactful, I know to me. So the more people who can learn about these different things that you're doing in the space, I think the better. So if you have time or this is something truly you're passionate about, please join one of these projects, work with Steve and Philippe and their team. They really are trying to fight for the common good in open source here today. So with that being said, we do have our own resource. Just want to make sure you guys can check it out. It's called secure.software. We keep it super easy for you to remember. And that is where you can go look up these different packages. And we do have PURLs. It's all free, so you can go look it up there. And we even just actually added on MCP server registry. So if you have an LLM you're looking at, go check it out. And let us know what you think. Lastly, we do have a couple resources. We'll make sure we add them when we email you guys after this. We put them in the chat already. But there is an SBOMs and PURLs blog that we have, as well as a couple of resources for you to check out. And like everybody else, we will be at RSA. So come say hi to us. We will be doing a book signing with Robert R. Snake Hansen and a few other people. So stay tuned. We'll see you next third Tuesday of the month in April. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day or night.